Hello and welcome to Raj Sabha TV. You're watching The Big Picture with your host Rajat Kane. Wishing all our viewers a very happy New Year 2019. And we begin this year's discussion in The Big Picture with a detailed discussion on the success of counter-insurgency operations in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. 257 terrorists were killed across Jammu and Kashmir this year in Operation All Out, while the action also saw coordination between the security forces and the local state police. Many of the dead included top commanders of Pakistan-based terror outfit Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammad. Briefing the press on the contours of Operation All Out, Director General of Police of the state, Dilbagh Singh, asserted that counter-insurgency operations would continue in 2019 with major focus on strengthening the border and hinterland security. While 91 security personnel also laid down their lives fighting militancy in the state, the security establishment can certainly be lauded for smooth conduct of the annual Amarnath yatra and the elections to panchayat local bodies after a long gap, overcoming security concerns and challenges. Now, how successful has been Operation All Out, and what are the challenges before the security establishment in the state? For more on this issue, we are joined with our guest, Major General Dhruv Katoch, Director, India Foundation, Ajay Banerjee, Defence Correspondent, The Tribune, and Lieutenant General retired Vinod Bhatia, former Director General, Military Operations. Thank you, all three of you, for joining us. I would like to start with you. Sir, how far you think that the figures reflect the success of this Operation All Out?
No, I would like to put the Operation All Out in a perspective which is slightly at variance with the common belief. Now, Operation All Out, firstly, is a very successful operation. The operation was launched, and the key elements of operation are precision operations, and minimizing collateral damage. This, of course, will be challenged by many, but the fact is that Operation All Out is supposedly precision operation with the minimum of collateral damage, and that's what is achieved actually. It has targeted the militants, it's targeted the terrorists, and has neutralized 257 terrorists over 1 year. So, you see, where is the information coming from? Where is the intelligence coming from? These are actionable intelligence, and the actionable intelligence coming from the people of Kashmir.
Right.
So, these are the positives I would like to see. And over the last 1 year, if you look at the operation carried out, the troops move out, the security forces move out, they have a target in place. They neutralize the target, or first they try to tell him to surrender and to come over ground. If it doesn't do that, and he fires, the target is neutralized and they fall back. Now, unfortunately, what has happened is everyone's talking about the operation as a muscular policy. There's nothing wrong with muscular policy. The security force has a job to do, and they're doing their job to the best of their abilities. Let me assure you that the security force in Jammu and Kashmir use minimum force. We have the best human rights records. Unfortunately, the streets have been taken over by a different narrative. That is, the stone pelters are there, and that is where the problem lies. Post neutralization of Buran Wahani in 2016, this has come about, and this is the challenge today. The next challenge is how to deal, how to control the streets actually, and that is where the government has to play a part. This is not a military problem actually. This is the government has to play a part out there. So I feel that the Operation All Out is a very successful operation. It should be continued. The tempo operation has to be continued. It should carry on, and there has to be a fully integrated grid, whether it's the grid on the counter-infiltration grid on the line of control and the counter-terrorism grid in the hinterland. Now, these grids are actually enmeshed into each other, so you do not let the terrorists come in, and out here you keep the terrorists under pressure, and they're on the back foot as it is. You can see some certain desperate actions by the terrorist organization, the backers in Pakistan. And there has also been reports of the local terrorists now being recruited. Yes, the local terrorists being recruited, but there may be large numbers, but they're confined to a few districts only, 2 districts. And on the plus side, if you see, there are a whole lot of youth which are volunteers to join the security forces. The rally which had happened in the Jammu and Kashmir Light Infantry Center 2 days back, there are 793, that was last Sunday, that is, the test was yesterday, or day before yesterday, and 793 applicants have been actually, successful out of thousands of them. So that's what I'm talking about. So it is not that everything is wrong out there and the streets have been taken over by the stone pelters. The stone pelters get money, they get paid for it, and the schools don't function, so they're out in the thing. So there are issues out there.
Right. General Katocha, do you think that stone pelters is a new narrative in the issue, which is throwing new challenges before the armed forces? You've served over there. You have a long stint in Jammu and Kashmir. Things which were there at the height of militancy, which we often hear in the 90s, and now it's the stone pelters that is different. Is it so?
The narrative has changed, very frankly. You see, when I served there in the 90s, after an operation, there was no stone pelting. That time, the narrative was totally different, and the influx of terrorists which were coming into the valley at that time was of a very, very high order. We must remember that when we are talking about the 90s until from there onwards, till such time as the fence was constructed in 2004, 5, 6, that is the period when the fence came up. And it was only after the fence came up that some sort of semblance of the capacity of the forces to keep the inflow of terrorists came into play. Now, stone pelting per se is not a new phenomenon. I think it's a very old tactic, and it is a throwaway from what has been happening in Palestine and in the Gaza Strip. And that is where those people perfected it, and from there it has come in here. Now, one of the reasons why it has come up here, in my personal view, is that I think the militants, the terrorists and their Pakistani backers, they were losing the plot. And suddenly they realized that unless we do something different, you see, they have no traction left at all. Now, how do you do something different? Now you get in the civilians involved in the fight. And when the civilians get involved in a fight, there may be a blowback, somebody may die. And if it dies, then that makes for very great visibility on the international media. You see, then people can go around, all the people who, the human rights activists, they can actually tom this fact that, listen, so-and-so action took place, 3 civilians were killed by the security forces. Now, what General Bhatia just said a little bit earlier, I just want to expand on that because I think that's a very vital point. He said that the Indian Army has got a most impeccable record of human rights. And I can vouchsafe for that. You see, when you are looking at operations which have been carried out, similar type of operations which were carried out, let us say in Pakistan. Pakistan is a bad example. It is a rogue country. But I will still use Pakistan as an example. When they carried out these operations in North Waziristan, where the population was approximately 1 million, the record state that 1 million people were evacuated and rendered displaced persons, which means 100% of the population of a complete area, North Waziristan, was evacuated. The towns were bombed to smithereens. Those photographs came out in the Dawn newspaper. It is not something which I am saying, right? They used aircraft. They used jet fighters against their own people. They used tanks. They used heavy artillery. Now, you take that and now you see what does the Indian Army use. The Indian Army, when it goes out on a patrol, it does not even open fire. The first bullet is always fired by the terrorist. And that is why we have a very, very high incidence of officer casualties, because it is the officer who leads. And it is only after that that the firefight starts. And if you actually take into account that these 257 people who have been killed in, say, at least 200 to 200 plus operations, the number of civilian casualties which have taken place may be just 5 or 6 or 7 casualties. You see, the collateral damage has been practically zero. And that goes for the record for the excellent manner in which the Indian Army has conducted its operations. And I would say also, as far as the supporting forces, the CRPF and the local police, I think they've done a marvelous job too. So I'm not too convinced about this argument of the human rights, that there has been human rights abuses and all that. That's not really there. Altogether. But on the stone pelters, I think this is a new strategy. It needs to be countered. And it is not simply that those people are doing it out of a desire. They are paid for it. And there's the last element which I want to put on is the stone pelters, which is, I think, a point which people generally fail to get. You see, there is something called the power of the gun when you are operating in the valley, the power of the militant gun or the terrorist gun. Now, the terrorists will simply say, if we are having a rally and if something happens, we want all these villagers to come out and support us and pelt stones or do whatever they want, at least collect together. Now, the question is, if they do not come, it is not a voluntary thing. If they do not come, then there is a fear they may be targeted a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks later. However, if they come, there is no fear of the security forces because there will be no retaliation from the security forces. That is the whole point. So the thing is totally skewed in favor of in favor of the terrorists and the stone pelters. And I think that is something which we need to reverse.
Right.
And one of the ways it needs to be reversed is to give a clear message that if you pelt stones when an operation is going on, you will be treated as the enemy. Now, that message, if it goes across, will send a semblance of sanity into the whole situation. Otherwise, I think it will continue.
Right, right. We'll continue with the stone pelters issue. Mr. Banerjee, do we see Operation All Out as a fine example of a good coordination between the security forces, the local police and the local intelligence? Because the operation doesn't begin at the spot itself. They also have to collect a lot of intelligence. So do you see that this Operation All Out, has been a good example of that collective coordination?
Undoubtedly, yes, because see, the army is the lead agency in the valley. They also have the BSF at the LC, the CRPF in the valley, and Jammu Kashmir in the valley, besides intelligence sources which provide local inputs where what is happening. Without the local intelligence, you cannot operate. And Jammu Kashmir police has got the best intelligence sources because those boys are locals. Like the locals out there, they know better that who's linked to whom and who's going where and what is the local dialect being spoken. The army does not speak Kashmiri language. The local boys of Jammu Kashmir police speaks the Kashmiri language also. So they pick out a lot of chatter which is happening. They are also on the family WhatsApp groups and they know what is happening. The army is just there to control the situation. When you talk about Operation All Out, we cannot miss two little aspects. One, that Pakistan clearly knows that its game in Jammu Kashmir is around 30 years now. The policy of 1,000 cuts which General Zia-ul-Haq talked about in 1988 and 1989.
Right.
Since then and now, things have changed radically. So radically that I would suggest that the militants at the moment are struggling. They are struggling to regroup, and they are struggling to even counter the military in any fashion. They are just novices at the moment because largely, since the fence came up in 2003 and 4 and 5, large part of the Indian Army's policy has been shifted towards tackling them at the LOC.
Right.
When you tackle them at the LOC, the number of people going in is lesser.
Yes.
So when you kill them at the LOC, that is why we are facing greater casualties at the line of control. We have had 50 civilian deaths from Pakistan firing because our boys are retaliating at the LC. Today, on Sunday night, there was a border action team trying to infiltrate into a post in Naugam, which was countered and 2 Pakistani commandos died. Now, Pakistan is yet to claim their body also. Pakistan's game in Jammu Kashmir is up. That these young boys trained holding a AK-47 in his hand will get so-called freedom for Kashmir. That game is totally up. It is on the last stages, but now, as I would always maintain, that India now needs to have a kind of political intervention into Jammu and Kashmir. Military's work is almost over. They need a political intervention now. And the time is now. Time is running out very quickly.
What do you mean by political intervention?
I mean, talk to all people. Just 2 days ago, Mr. Rajnath Singh, the Home Minister, spoke in Lok Sabha and said, we are ready to talk to all people in Jammu and Kashmir. See, there is a very important statement. People are busy in this hangama in the parliament, which is happening. But Mr. Rajnath made this statement in that hangama, they are ready to talk to all people in Kashmir. See, the point is by political intervention, I mean that there has to be an outreach to these boys. As General Katoch has rightly pointed out, if these boys and their families do not support the militants, they face the gun of the militant. They are given money and they don't go. There is a local watcher, spotter, who spots these boys who don't go and pelt stones. Otherwise, how can you explain a 16-year-old girl or a 18-year-old girl pelting stones? It is unnatural. It is by the force of the gun and the lure of the money.
Right.
So the government intervention has to come in. The lure of the money has to stop. The routes have to stop, to give the money. And 2, the fear of the gun has to go away of these militants. Now, local boys on WhatsApp groups, how these stone pelters accumulated, it happened in Pulwama just 15-20 days ago. When those so-called 7 civilians died, people said 7 civilians. Sorry, they were pelting stones at the Indian Army. They had no business doing it. So when people say 7 civilians died, they are not civilians. They are protesters intervening in an operation of the Indian Army. Nobody has told them to go there.
Well, it's a debate whether protesters, I mean, would we call it civilians or not? That's fine. That's totally your opinion. Mr. Bhatia, I mean, it's not just the civilians who are facing, as Mr. Banerjee pointed out, that civilians are also facing gun of the militants, that you have to join us or you have to do certain things for us. It's also the local police of Jammu and Kashmir, which we see that often get on the other end. So for the security apparatus in general, these are the big challenges, like to keep morale of the local police as well?
Oh, definitely. I think Jammu and Kashmir police is doing a absolutely effective job out there. They're very, very good out there. The coordination between the various agencies is par excellent. You see, the problem, I would like to go a step further. If you look at the last year and a half or 2 years, what has happened is about 40 odd security personnel have been targeted by the militants or the terrorists. Okay. And most of them are policemen, and they're the policemen who are either after their duty they're going home, or they're in their homes, including army personnel. Lieutenant Faiz was this thing, then it was Aurangzeb, and similarly police personnel. So what the Pakistani backed terrorists are doing, they're trying to tell the people not to help the security forces. That's the message they want to convey. So that is one thing. Second thing, I'd like to take off from what Mr. Banerjee and General Khatoj was saying. The stone pelters, I think they've been emboldened, encouraged, empowered by the political discourse out there.
Okay.
And the political discourse of the local politicians is that, every time you find their statements,
right.
And that is what is helping. These are not stone civilians, as you call it. These are stone pelters who are abetting terrorism, who are aiding terrorism.
Right.
Okay, I do not know. If I'm standing out there, like you said, you only come to know once a shot is fired. I'll only come to know that it's not a stone when a grenade is thrown on me and Molotov cocktails have been thrown on me. So to say that, these are innocent civilians who are bystanders, I think we got to get the narrative correct, absolutely. These are not innocent civilians. They know exactly what they're doing. They've been paid to do that. And I think that is what we need to address at all levels. We need to give them opportunities. We got to give them avenues. We need to improve the education system. Jammu and Kashmir has been because of conflict zone. No one wants to invest out there. So there are issues out there. Schools don't open. If the schools don't open, the youth is at home. So it's easy to get them 200 rupees for just going out an hour and throwing a few stones. And these are also categorized, actually, if you ask me. So that is one aspect. But challenge of the security forces, I think, will continue to, the success of Operation All Out will be the indicator of the success of the security forces.
Right.
Security forces, the military, the army can only give a platform for solutions. It cannot give the solution. The solution lies with the political discourse.
Right.
So the politicians have to find it's a political solution. So the army and the security forces can only bring the violence level to subcritical levels. And thereafter, and we have lost such, in 2007-8, I remember I was there, and the violence levels were very subcritical. Then we lost out on that. So every time the army goes out, it brings the violence levels down. But the political, I think, the local politics and the center have to get on together, find a solution, move towards solution. It can't happen tomorrow, but in the long run, we need to have a strategy for Jammu and Kashmir, which I think is lacking.
Right. General Khatoj, there are reports, as Jammu Kashmir police in their press briefing said, that 300 more terrorists supposed to be are seemingly active today. Do we see this Operation All Out getting more intense in times to come, or rather this year to come?
No, I'm not really comfortable with words like getting more intense or less intense, because I have operated there.
Right.
You see, whenever I'm putting myself in the position of a commanding officer, a company commander, or a soldier operating there, I am intense 24 hours of the day, 365 days of the year. I cannot be more intense or less intense, right? So I think when we're looking at the military force operations, as soon as they get the information, those people will move out and they will address the target. And if, say, for a period of 1 month, there is no information, well, they won't. So I'm not looking at the intensity of the operations will depend really upon the number of terrorists which are located there. And when terrorist activities increase, then the intensity of the operation will also rise. And when they go down, then I think the intensity will also go down. One of the ways in which the terrorists can, one of the methodologies of terrorist operation is, they go from village to village, right. And there is a group of, say, 10 to 12 terrorists. They can cover an area of, say, 100 to 200 or 400 square miles, right? Now, that is their beat. Now, the question is, if you eliminate the slot, then that beat gets vacant, and then the terror fear in those villages goes away. So it is important to see that we keep eliminating them, and the lesser the numbers of terrorists which are there operating, the greater is their difficulty to influence large bodies of people. I think that is one point which we need to remember. So when we are looking at it at that point of view, I think these operations have been very, very successful, and the element of fear is going down. But even one gun is adequate to cause fear. So we've got to remove all guns. But the question is, you see, I'm not very convinced as what my colleagues are saying that both of them, when we talk of it as a political problem and a political solution. I think there are three aspects to this problem. Okay. One is the external support. This external support comes from Pakistan, and I think it is a well-known fact. Yeah. So regardless of the fact that you have any political solution within the valley, you see, so long as outside support continues to occur, or continue to come in, we are not going to get to a solution. So ultimately, I think what needs to be addressed, if you're looking at a political solution, you need to address the Pakistan military, and you need to punish them to such an extent that they will be motivated not to do it any further. I'm using that word very deliberately, you see. So there has to be consequences to what Pakistan does to create instability within India, and we have got to make sure that those consequences are very, very severe. This is one point. I think the second point, when we are looking at it within the state of J&K, I think for a very long time now, the administration has crumbled. It's a very sorry term to use, but it has happened. And to a very large extent, the administration has also got compromised. It is going to take a huge effort to revitalize the administrative infrastructure. And unless we revitalize the administrative infrastructure, you're not going to get forward on development. It has been very rightly said by Mr. Banerjee and General Bhatia that the army is really in a position to get the situation to a point by which other instruments of the state can function. Right. But ultimately, the solution has to come from within the state administrative infrastructure. And my final point here is that the element of radicalization which has crept into the youth, you see, the point is that right down to hate preaching which is going on in some of the schools, to the hate preaching which is emanating from the mosques, the state as of now has made no effort to stop that. So what has happened is, and this is a very open phenomenon in the whole of Pakistan, the way that society has got radicalized ever since partition, and the process gathered momentum in the Zia years. But in India too, when we are looking at J&K, I think a very large portion of this radicalization of our little children, of our young boys and girls, has taken place in the schools and in the madrasas. And I think it is incumbent on the part of the state to see that that stops. Once that stops, we have to wait for some time. And this is the sort of concerted action we take for peace to come in. And then let democracy flourish. I don't think we're looking at a political solution. Please let democracy flourish. Things will be okay the way insurgencies get out. But again, just one more point I want to highlight once again.
Very briefly, yeah.
Very, very briefly. How insurgency got finished in Sri Lanka? How was the LTT eliminated? Because the island was isolated. Nothing could come in, nothing could go out. I think we need the same system here. So unless we can stop outside support from coming in, support which is coming in directly from Pakistan and funds which are coming in from Pakistan and from the Gulf countries, I think this is going to be a very, very long haul.
Right. It will be going to be a long haul, certainly. Mr. Banerjee, often we read in the press a statement of Kashmiri politicians that situation seems to be pretty worse or have reached the level of the 90s. Do we really think so that situation happens to be that severe in the valley right now?
No way. No way. No way. It's actually laughable if somebody says that. I know the Kashmiri politicians are saying that. But 90s, see, please understand, 1989, the Soviet forces withdraw from Afghanistan. The so-called Mujahids trained by US and Pakistan enter Kashmir. Yeah. They are motivated, foreign-trained, armed-carrying militants, highly trained. These boys are novices. They are nowhere near those boys of the early 90s. This is what I learned from the forces. The situation is nowhere near the 90s. It is actually very close to what it was in 2007, 2008. Very close to that. It is almost close to that. The militancy is almost on its last legs. Now we have to take firm action on the ground. The state probably, as General Katoch has pointed out, I was hesitating of saying it, had not just crumbled, it is actually non-existent at the moment. Politicians are going for vote banks, sorry to say that. In Kashmir, everywhere, South Kashmir is very sensitive at the moment. The army and the security forces have identified certain villages which are labeled as dark villages. By dark, they mean radicalized villages. Now, within those dark villages, there are pockets of hope. We have to look at those pockets of hope. The boys and girls who want to study, who want to move forward, don't want to be part of this daily gun culture.
Right.
There are those kind of people also available in the valley. We have to tap those people out. But again, if there is a single militant roaming around, he has the fear of the gun, and there are certain political parties, I'll not name them on television, who are prompting these people, who have their spotters in each village. that who is not a militant supporter. They are giving them false hopes of some kind of azadi. Get real. Even under the UN resolution, there is no talk of azadi. Kashmir acceded to India as per the document which was accepted by the then British Governor General. There is no doubt about it. Now, Pakistan holds a part of Indian territory, which is called Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and also in Gilgit-Baltistan. Pakistan's game in this is just to keep on sending these people and telling their own population that the Pakistan army is doing a great job in Kashmir, whereas it is not. At the moment, I think the Indian security forces have an upper hand at the moment in Kashmir.
Right. Thanks, gentlemen, for joining us. So clearly, Operation All Out has been a good success in the year 2018, and not just the militants who were killed, but also the coordination between the security forces across the state. That's it for now in Big Picture. Thanks for watching Rajya Sabha TV.